Hi, on this episode of Positive Takes, I want to take a brief look back at The Batman, written and directed by Matt Reeves, and also written by Peter Craig. It came out pretty recently and had a budget of about $190 million and made about seven times that, or made about $700 million, I should say. Starring Robert Pattinson, Zoe Kravitz, Colin Farrell, Paul Dano, Jeffrey Wright, and Andy Serkis, as well as several other incidental characters. This is a movie that I was kind of dreading coming out a little bit, after the Nolan films and the Ben Affleck turn at the role, and a few other adaptations throughout the years. Obviously, Michael Keaton and all the 90s versions. This is a movie that I was kind of feeling, do we really need another Batman film? Is there really anything left to this mythos that we can, expand upon and portray that would actually interest audiences? And I have to say, I was kind of initially underwhelmed from the first viewing, but then with subsequent viewings and reconsideration, I don't really know what I was so upset about. This is obviously an amazing movie, and it's probably the most accurate representation of what the character actually is. A character that's been written fairly consistently since around the 80s or 90s, depending on how you look at it. At least in the comics, there's a very coherent voice and attitude for the Batman, and that hasn't been something that's really been portrayed very well on screen. Even the Chris Nolan films, I think a lot of people would accuse of being overly serious. There is some humor, particularly with the Joker character, but definitely took that realistic tone and kind of went overboard with it a little bit. And I can see that complaint for sure. Even though I kind of grew up around the time of those movies coming out and really love them in a lot of ways. But this is Matt Reeves, going back to the drawing board and trying something completely new. This is a film that's, I think, clearly very much inspired by The Long Halloween, the Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale book. And in many ways actually improves upon it. You can also look at the Telltale The Batman video game series, which has many, many similarities to this movie, to the point where I'm kind of wondering if they played it and maybe were inspired by it. But the basic story elements are definitely drawn from The Long Halloween, minus all the elements that, Christopher Nolan already implemented in The Dark Knight. We don't have Harvey Dent or any of that stuff in it. And we get rid of a lot of the, crime family specific stuff. And just center a lot on Carmine Falcone and some of the other heads of the crime syndicates in Gotham. So this is very much a Batman Year 2 story, and with that, we also have similarities to things like Mask of the Phantasm, which itself was inspired by Batman Year 2. There was the Reaper character, or the Phantasm character in this case, and essentially what we have is and I believe, I had heard that this would be inspired also by Darren Cook's Ego, which confused me, certainly. If you've ever read that book, it's very much an inward journey, sort of a dark night of the soul, no pun intended. And this is a sort of extrapolation of that. We enter the movie with a Bruce that's been heavily, traumatized, obviously, by his childhood, and also, is immersing himself in the underbelly, world he would have known otherwise, growing up in privilege. So this is a Bruce that's, very close to falling off the edge, and that's something that, Andy Serkis's Alfred even points out to him. You're very close to falling into the abyss yourself. You can clearly see how he's, counterposed against Paul Dano's the Riddler character. And you see this in many other interpretations of the Batman, where we have, the idea that, but for certain rules and regulations and, his own desires to avenge his parents' death, this is very much a character that could fall into that darkness and become, the worst thing Gotham's ever seen, just killing anything that seems like a threat. We see the consequences of that in comics like Kingdom Come, or Under the Red Hood. Certainly he mentions that in that comic that, if he got rid of his one rule, and the Chris Nolan movies are obsessed with this one rule, but they never really explain why he doesn't kill. And this movie very much shows that if he did break that rule, he'd essentially become another crazed, psychopath vigilante that's just like going out there and massacring, random people. The look of this film, I think, is very much inspired by the Scott Snyder with Jock run of the Batman from the early 2010s, and yeah 2010s. And I think the cowl, the little neck hood thing. I'm very much glad that they have veered away from the all black suits that were initially, I guess, seen as more realistic or somehow better, and now they're very much incorporating the gray silver undertones. Not to the extent as in the comics, where essentially he's often depicted as wearing a cloth suit over probably layers of armor and Kevlar. But this is very much a bulletproof Kevlar suit. We see him take full advantage of that fact throughout the movie, where gangsters are shooting him up and he's shrugging it off essentially. And on that note, again, this is a Batman who has been depicted just like in the Chris Nolan movies. He is a horror villain to the criminals of Gotham, but also somewhat to the regular citizens as well. The cops fear and mistrust him. They often accuse him. How do we know he's not the one taking out to various people? How do we know he's not involved with the Riddler? Shades of Spider-Man there, where J. Jonah Jameson's always accusing him of being in league with the villains. And over the course of the movie, we actually see, and this is actually sort of similar to the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie, we see a Batman who realizes he needs to stand up for more than just fear. He needs to stand up for more than just vengeance, that recurring word and nickname that people give him throughout the film. So we see that he actually needs to stand up for hope, that he needs to actually inspire the people of Gotham to be better than they are, or inspire, a new class of villain. We get teases of the Joker, which also seems reminiscent of the Scott Snyder run a bit. Very grotesque looking, something, this is very seriously taking the idea of, like, what if chemicals or acid or something had destroyed this man's face? It's not the Joker where he's just painting his face, or, in The Dark Knight, the same thing. He cut himself up and he paints over it. This is a Joker who clearly is very driven from the comics, who probably did take a bath in some acid and ended up, with this horrible disfigured face. And brilliant casting, by the way, Barry Koenig, who I think auditioned originally for the Riddler, but then was given this role instead, offered it secretly. He's not featured that much in the movie, but you can see an extended scene that, I don't think really would have worked in the movie itself, but works perfectly well as a standalone little short of him acting as the Joker. And, it's exciting to imagine where we can go from this next. We could definitely see that Matt Reeves probably wants to continue his explorations, probably bringing in a Harvey Dent character and doing that whole arc. Or he might even go and do the Court of Owls, which would be a pretty good storyline for him to take. Throughout the acting is very good, I would say, particularly, and direction, by consequence. This is somebody who had made the Planet of the Apes reboot cycle, the second and third movies. So he clearly has a very good handle on character and on, dramatic story arc, characterization, serious acting. There is some humor in this movie throughout, though, very dry, mostly having to do with how people approach Batman, how they react to him. Zoe Kravitz does, I think, the best interpretation of Catwoman and most accurate to the comics. She can fight, she's an expert cat burglar, she has a romantic interest in the Batman, she kind of helps him begrudgingly throughout, and, she's very accurate to the original Frank Miller depiction, Frank Miller... his version of him from Year One, where she's, African-American, short hair, walking the streets of Gotham, intermingling in the underworld to get into places other people couldn't get to. Her roommate's obviously also driven from that same storyline. So we have almost I think I'd say an improvement on various story arcs from The Long Halloween, whereas I think the tendency in that comic was to get a little too convoluted. Bringing in every villain, the mystery gets really convoluted. It's almost too many storylines clashing for one another. Just like in the adaptation, the animated adaptation of Hush, of The Long Halloween, we slightly rewrite it, so it's not, who it was in the comics. We don't even have that character in this movie. And instead, we focus on the Riddler. And we have shades of Thomas Elliot in that character as well. we learn late in the movie that the whole reason he's doing this is because he was actually an orphan. He actually was directly impacted by Thomas Wayne, and him not really taking care of the orphans in the orphanage the way they said they would. So that's the direct reason why he has had such a hard life and why he is now driven to do these psychopathic acts. And this is also a character that's clearly inspired, by Seven, by these really dark and gritty neo-noirs, and unfortunately by, the very sad real-life occurrences that we've seen throughout modern history of, crazy masked shooters, even the one in Arizona, the one who shot up some people in the Dark Knight Rises premiere, dressed as the Joker, supposedly. So I think it's a very challenging topic and a really interesting choice to tackle. Pretty brave, actually, to do that. This is a movie that's, really well shot. The music is very, it's kind of monotone. It's very, very much following a motif. It's Michael Giacchino, who, always does excellent work. Initially, again, I was sort of underwhelmed by the music, but, it actually really grows on you and you see why they're like layering the motifs so much. So it does become iconic. You can think of like Star Wars or Indiana Jones or any of these like major franchises from like John Williams or something, where you just like get pounded. That's weird phrasing. Where the music pounds into, where the music just keeps going over and over again until it's like very much a theme, an anthem for the movie. So I will say I also really enjoy the choreography of how the Batman fights. He's not trying to be super flashy. He's not, it's not overly devoted to Krav Maga or something like that, like with the Nolan films. This is just a Batman who's taking, also drawn inspiration from the Arkham series, I assume, how that depicts him fighting, just like the Ben Affleck one was, where he very much takes advantage of his gadgets. He has like a little electric shock tool. He uses various different implements to get a leg up on the criminal element. He has, some grapple things on his gauntlet, which it kind of reminded me of the animated series. But this is also a Batman who hasn't really been in love or anything like that, so it's not like the Mask of Phantasm in that way, or like the Nolan films. He doesn't have like a childhood crush or anything like that. He's just, very much a loner. Just going out there and not really living for himself. This is actually a Bruce Wayne who's shown as very antisocial. He sleeps all day and doesn't wake up until night. When he comes out in the day, he looks pale, gaunt, very drawn, like he doesn't get enough vitamin D, wearing sunglasses, doesn't want to interact with people. This is not the playboy Bruce Wayne personality that he'll probably build up in the next subsequent films. Of course, Robert Pattinson can be incredibly charming, as we see most recently in Tenet, and films such as that. So it's very exciting to see how they're going to continue evolving this character. I hope they're not just thinking of a trilogy for this. They could keep it going, almost indefinitely if they wanted to, depending on how many different arcs they try to pick up on. There's obviously no dearth of characters to draw from, and I'd be actually really excited to see Matt Reeves try to tackle somebody like, Robin, who, or I guess I shouldn't say Batgirl, but maybe they could bring that back. Because I think he could do a really good interpretation of those characters, and I don't think we have gotten any really good cinematic Robin. The closest we got was in The Dark Knight Rises, where we have Joseph Gordon-Levitt is revealed to have secretly have been Robin all along and kind of been playing the sidekick role in that movie. But that's also a very compromised version, and also a grown man. And obviously we all know why they shy away from the idea of actually having a kid be Robin, but I think that would be really cool and really interesting, and obviously we have the effects to do that now. Just look at Marvel's latest things with She-Hulk and how they interpreted Daredevil, like just having a little figure in green and red and yellow leaping around, using the Tim Drake outfits. I think would be really cool if they did it right. I don't know. I think people are just scared of that character, but you can obviously look at the sequel to The Long Halloween and try to draw inspiration from that. So yeah, I think the plot arc of this was also really clever. You don't exactly know what's going on. We have these riddles that are also fairly clever, but we eventually realize, what his modus operandi is, why he's targeting these people, some really twisted, almost like saw traps. We have this rat cage. Various references to bats. We have this whole thing with the paint tool that a beat cop helps the Batman discover. You have a really intricate plot, which again I think is drawn from the Scott Snyder run of Year Zero, which surprised the hell out of me. I never thought I'd see that comic arc referenced in a movie, where he blows up all the dams and floods Gotham. Very much a hard reset for the city. And just like in that comic, this obviously will create a vacuum for the freaks to come out and fill in, the space that the established criminal order will be, vacating as they keep getting killed, and as, Commissioner Gordon becomes increasingly efficient at taking down this. Jeffrey Wright did an awesome portrayal of Jim Gordon. I'm sure there must be a segment of community who's upset again about not just hiring white people for every character, but if you can look past that, then I think you can definitely see that his portrayal is very accurate to the comics, and a little more nuanced even than Gary Oldman's. And I love the Gary Oldman interpretation. That was very much classic Commissioner Gordon from Year One and all those Frank Miller books. But here we have one that's slightly reinterpreted, and one that's again is learning to trust the Batman. Learning to depend on him and help him, try to root out some of this corruption and evil that seems to be, very much consuming Gotham. And we have this whole idea of lineage, which, if you look back through the more recent comics, they're very much interested in reinterrogating the Wayne legacy and various, black sheep members of the Wayne family who come back as villains, or who somehow had influenced the city negatively, like with the Court of Owls storyline. So I think we have a really interesting dynamic here with a Batman that is, very competent, very clever, still human. We see him struggling at the end to try to take down the various shooters inspired by the Riddler. We also do get a very good portrayal of Carmine Falcone. Very good acting there. We get a few other, John Turturro, Peter Sarsgaard, who are also in the movie, doing pretty good portrayals, even though they're not in the movie that much. I think definitely looking at the script, you can see that these guys really know what they're drawing from, what they're talking about. I say DC gave them all the money, let them make shows, whatever they want to do. I hope they still do that Arkham-based show that they were thinking about doing. That sounded, it could be very much like the Grant Morrison comic. Just straight up adapt the Grant Morrison comic for the sequel, and I think that'd be an amazing movie. People keep talking about how they should do some movie where superheroes trapped in a supermax prison, or in Arkham Asylum, and I don't know why they haven't done that yet. Obviously, it worked really well for the Arkham Asylum video game. So that's a perfect premise for a Batman film, where he can come face to face with a bunch of different freaks. We already have this whole rogues gallery. I haven't even talked about Colin Farrell, acting under layers of makeup, doing, again, probably the best. I love the Danny DeVito interpretation as well, but that's not the Penguin from the comics. It's just a circus freak, essentially. And this is very much, the Penguin from the comics, where he's trying to be a legitimate or semi-legitimate criminal mastermind who runs a nightclub, and he has twins as enforcers, which definitely made me think of Tweedledee and Tweedledum from the comics. So in my head, that's definitely who those characters were supposed to be. So really tight action, really well filmed. I think they used the volume for all those rooftop shots of the Batman and Catwoman hanging out. So it actually worked really well there, because we're doing a whole out of focus, dawn light sort of situation. So that's I think. Oh, and I think they also did that for the chase scene between the Penguin and the Batman. And again, I wasn't that excited for the Batmobile when I first saw the shots. I was like, okay, it's just a souped-up car. But they did a really good job of utilizing it and having an exciting chase sequence with lots of explosions and stunts. And that was also shot in the volume and with a rig that would go up and down and around. So it's very dynamic, seems very realistic, even though it's not actually real at all. I think this is a very interesting and good depiction of of Gotham City itself. Very much drawn on similar lines as the Joker. 20 years down the line. I don't think these films are connected at all, obviously, but very much a grimy, greasy, drippy city that feels disgusting to be in, to experience. Everything's wet and shiny all the time, and harsh blacks and underlit neons, things like that. It makes it very much feel alive. I'm glad that the Chris Nolan movies obviously did a good job as well, but that was very much just Chicago and Pittsburgh and various actual cities. Just trying to feel like a city. But I think movies like The Birds of Prey and this and Joker are doing a really good job of making Gotham itself feel like a criminal element, or feel like a cesspool of crime. So I think they should just continue doing that as well. I really enjoyed the romance between the Batman and the Catwoman. I think it was the best interpretation of that as well. I do like Michelle Pfeiffer as well, and Anne Hathaway did a great job, and of course the '60s versions. But again, I think this is the most true to the comic books itself. If I were to show somebody one interpretation of the Batman and be like, this is basically what the comics is, and if you like this, go check out The Long Halloween, go check out The Court of Owls, go watch the animated series, the excellent animated series. This is that character. This isn't, trying to be overly realistic, or, being afraid of their own properties and, like, making it super ridiculous, like in the Schumacher films, or just trying to, extract cash from kids, toyetic stuff like that. Although, again, the Camaro Batmobile was pretty cool. I think that's what it was. I'm not a car person, sorry if I got that wrong. So anyway, I definitely think this is worth your time. Even if you are sick of Batman, even if you are sick of DC messing everything up, this is one they actually got super right. As long as they keep actually finding interesting filmmakers with a unique vision, who aren't just trying to exploit the property, I think they really can keep building up. It doesn't even have to be a universe. They can just keep building up individual movies that kind of work alongside one another, and I think they can really keep pushing that further. So yeah, I'm excited to see the sequel. I'm excited to see any extensions. I thought Robert Pattinson again did a really great job, both as Bruce Wayne and as the Batman. I thought the mystery was actually compelling in the story, and I'm glad they actually made it a mystery film, because that's pretty much what every Batman comic is, but for some reason they always make it like an action movie or a kids film or some other crap. I thought Nolan also did a great job with that, but it's very much like a crime thriller, or like Heat or something like that, or like Eastern Mysticism with the first one. Or I guess he was obsessed with A Tale of Two Cities for the third one for some reason. I don't know. I guess that was just what was in the air at the time with Occupy and all that stuff. So yeah, this was a great movie. Matt Reeves always does a really great job. This is a very unique feeling movie with really interesting visuals and sounds. Again, fierce competition, obviously, with Christopher Nolan, but it goes very much up to that level, and maybe even beyond in certain instances. It's not afraid to actually engage with the story and history of this character, and to portray a Batman who is wrestling with, is he doing the right thing? Is he maybe traumatizing people? We see that with the beginning with the Joker gang. There is this kid that he has the potential to maybe reach further and take out of the gang, but maybe he just scares him and inspires him to do even worse things. So we can see that he should focus on rehabilitation and trying to fix these broken people. Paul Dano is obviously super insane, but the things motivating him are the same things motivating the Batman, trying to get rid of corruption. So yeah, I think this is a very interesting script that draws obviously from a lot of real life things that are, commonly recurring. And yeah, I think they should keep drawing inspiration from that. I'd love to see Zoe Kravitz come back. I'd love to see, what they do with Colin Farrell. I'd love them even to take on some of the more out there characters. We haven't gotten a good version of Poison Ivy. We have seen the Joker, but it's always so convoluted. Maybe we could see a straight up Joker plot, more like The Killing Fish or something like that. So yeah, we'll see what happens in the future. Hopefully this new guy at WB, this new guy from Discovery, doesn't keep messing everything up and, ruining everyone's hard work. But it doesn't sound like anything's going to stop the Batman 2 from coming out. When you make, almost 3 times as much as the budget, obviously you're going to get a sequel. So So hopefully they don't get fired or some other thing happens to prevent another sequel, because I'd love to see them keep building this world up and see what they do next. Okay, definitely check this one out, even if you are sick of the Batman. Again, I was kind of feeling Batman fatigue, but I definitely can admit that I was wrong on this one.